very top one. The very top one is, it starts off with an investor that's going to put some money up front. The intermediary is going to be the impact investment company. Okay, and so in the example I'll illustrate here, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gives money to an impact investment firm, an intermediary known as social finance. Social finance then funds Upswing, which is the social service provider. Then Upswing services the needed populations, so in this case students, and the needs that it's going to service are either going to be, right, educational learning outcomes or mental health care wellness outcomes. And this is where Anna comes in. This is where the AI comes in, because the AI is what's going to be doing the data mining so that they can produce the metrics to show that they have achieved those impacts or outcomes in order to reimburse that money from the government. So after they get those, collect that data, it then goes to independent validators, and they're going to use indexes that fall under basically social credit metrics. Okay, and these could be anything from ESG to SDG to DEI. And after they produce those outcomes and get them authenticated by the independent reviewers, they send that to the government, and then the government pays back the monies, right? Potentially all of it, or maybe a profit. A little bit about the indexes for a second here, before we look at some of the actual venture capital firms and impact investment firms that are funding Upswing currently. So largely these are standardized by global governance institutions, including the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. And so we've got three broad sets of indexes: ESG, SDG, and DEI. These are basically recursively interchangeable for the most part. Okay, so like in ESG, it's environmental, social, and government scoring. It's basically corporate social credit scoring, heavily promoted by the World Economic Forum and the UN. The environmental part largely overlaps with the core of the SDGs. So the SDGs are the Sustainable Development Goals. We usually think of these as environmental. So like goals number 6, 7, 13, 14, and 15 all relate to biodiversity and natural resource stewardship. But if you look at the S part, the social part, right, that's essentially going to be overlap with the DEI stuff. But if you look at the SDGs, numbers 1, 2, 5, and 10, those all focus on socioeconomic, ethnic, gender equity, etc. And then the governance part has to do with public-private stakeholder representation based on stakeholder capitalism econometrics formulated by Klaus Schwab himself. He's the former chair, founder of the World Economic Forum. Now, just to take a little note here before we look at some of those impact investment firms, I want to disabuse you of any notion that any of these environmental, social governance, SDG, DEI scores have anything to do with protecting the environment or helping marginalized groups of people. This is about establishing new economic indexes for new financial instruments through which natural and human resources can be monetized and exploited under the guise of social justice and environmental conservation. Okay. So take a look at some of these. This is a nice overview of some of the larger impact investment firms and others that are financing impact investments at Upswing. So some of these are not actually impact investment firms proper, right? So like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Lumina Foundation, JP Morgan Chase, but the investments that they provide for Upswing are effectively impact investments. So like JP Morgan Chase, the monies that they're giving to Upswing is aimed at improving outcomes for HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, okay? So if we look at, let's just walk through some of these. So the Lumina Foundation, just look at some of like who's behind these companies, how do they overlap and interlock. Lumina Foundation on the board serves Austin Goolsbee. He was, he currently is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, and he was formerly the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Barack Obama, and he happens to be a member of the Order Skull and Bones. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we noted, right, funds social finance, but it also directly funds Upswing as well, okay? And then social finance has partnered with Charles Koch Foundation and Google itself to procure other impact investments for other projects. Google here is, again, it's not an impact investment firm, but the arm of Google that's involved in financing Upswing is it's their Google for Startups Accelerator. So it's basically your venture capital arm of Google, and this one is geared toward helping black-owned businesses, so black entrepreneurs, again, under the guise of helping marginalized groups. If we look at imaginable futures, this is set up by Pierre Omidyar. He's the guy that set up eBay, one of the biggest e-commerce giants. And eBay, on record, has had some interesting ties to the Central Intelligence Agency, and it was the CIA. It was their venture capital firm, In-Q-Tel, is probably one of the most prominent venture capital firms that we know about. And In-Q-Tel was what provided some of the seed monies for Google, particularly to fund the what was their Maps program before it was called Keyhole or something like that. I can't remember what it was called before it was Google Maps, but In-Q-Tel funded that. And In-Q-Tel also funded Palantir, has funded Palantir, which is founded by Peter Thiel, and Peter Thiel coming out of Stanford, where they have their own impact investment firm that also funds Upswing. Okay, so the main takeaway that I want y'all to take from this is that this AI thing is not just about automating labor in order to consolidate the means of production. It's about scaling ubiquitous biopsychosocial data mining in order to amass predictive analytics that can be monetized to create new human capital bond markets for the new social impact finance economy of the fourth industrial revolution. Stated differently, the AI endgame is all about upgrading from surveillance capitalism to a techno-feudal panopticon in which workers and consumers are converted into literal human resources and indentured into algorithmic bondage to be bought and sold like digital chattel in the global social credit economy of the fourth industrial revolution. And that is my presentation.
I feel better now.
I heard somebody say they were... I'd heard somebody say they were overwhelmed and scared during the last presentation. I was like, uh-oh, well, let's get ready for this next one, I think. So, questions? Yes, sir.
It sounds like this is very similar to RED, the R-E-D-D, where they're trying to sort of monetize nature itself, and so they're basically using human beings in the same way that they're doing it for stars in Brazil or something.
Yeah, and then those are largely, they're called natural asset companies, and so they're essentially the same idea. And I don't want to go too far into a detour here, but this is where you mentioned blockchain and crypto comes into this, because a lot of how they're going to program the payouts for these impact investments is going to be through the stable coins, through the crypto, because not only are they programmable, but you can sort of also extrapolate algorithms from the fintech financial technology inputs to crypto inputs, and then in terms of education, the learning outcomes. And then from that, you get these predictive analytics that gets your social credit profiling, and this is going to determine for the students like what jobs they get, et cetera. The idea of charter schools was coined by Albert Shanker. He's the president of the AFT for almost 30 years, okay? Randy Weingarten herself has ran a charter school before, right? And so I knew that was coming one day. People, you know, who's the spokesperson, Corey DeAngelis is always, you know, anti-Weingarten, and we've gone back and forth on social media. But Shanker was also a member of the Trilateral Commission, and so he's on record. If you can go to my website and you can read my article. I did a series on a global union federation that it's called Education International, that the AFT and the NEA are a part of, and several of those people are members of the World Economic Forum. So that brings us full circle there. K-12 Inc. was funded by Ellison. K-12 Inc. was the first nationwide virtual charter school, online charter school, which basically set up the online platforms where you can plug in all these apps for data mining. And that was the chair of that, the person that set up K-12 Inc. was Bill Bennett, who was the Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan, and it was Peter Thiel that wrote his speeches, okay? You mentioned the charter school thing. The next thing on the menu here is what they're calling school choice. Now, charter schooling is part of school choice, but this round of school choice is about the vouchers, or what are also known as education savings accounts. Sometimes they call them scholarships, tax-credited scholarships. It's all basically just vouchers with some small difference differences on how the monies are distributed. But I wrote my most recent article, it's at the top of my article page on my website. It has to do with the PayPal Mafia's influence on this charter school, this voucher movement, largely them funding this digital wallet industry, which is going to be sort of the stepping stone or the intermediary through which you can eventually start transacting the stable coins for the programmable funds, as I noted. And so two of those digital wallet companies, one is Merit International, actually changed its name to Aspire Technologies not too long after I wrote the article. I'd like to think maybe that had something to do with the article, but who knows. Another one he funds is Odyssey, is called Odyssey. These are both funded by Andreessen Horowitz. Mark Andreessen is in the PayPal Mafia orbit, but he also was on the board of eBay again. So all these companies, all these public-private partnerships, these are all being propped up by the same oligarchs for the same agenda.
I'm a logistics worker, right, and I'm a UPS driver, so I see the inequality in our school systems firsthand. You have the public school right down the street, and you have the charter school on a main boulevard. They didn't do like any environmental impact, like what would happen, right? I mean, complete traffic jams, safety issues, right? And when I'm at a public school, I only deliver maybe 1 or 2 little boxes. But if I'm delivering at a charter school, Amazon is making out like a bandit too. They're getting like 20, 30, 40 pieces at that stop. I mean, Jeff Bezos is making a killing off of the charter schools as well. That's something that you don't know about. Nobody talks about it. But as a logistic worker, I see the inequality in our communities, in our society now. It's amazing. Yeah. Some of these schools that I go to have homeless encampments next to them. It's pretty bad out there. So I just wanted to add that real quick.
No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
The whole propaganda. They spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars propagandizing for privatization. That you'd be lucky to get ahead. I mean, in California, we used to have the best public school system in the United States. That's in California. And it's been destroyed in part with charter schools, but it's also been destroyed because the union leadership have accepted the capitalist framework. They don't want to go after these billionaires. They don't want to go after the billionaires. Who's running the state school system? I went to the school board, the state school board, over this issue in Richmond, where this privateer, billionaire was, ripping off the students. So I go there and I find out that the state school board actually has a bunch of charter school operators on the state school board appointed by Brown and now Newsom. That is appointing charter schools operators to the state school board. And Tony Thurmond, who's the state superintendent of public instruction, because of this crisis in charter schools, says, he's going to set up a committee to investigate charter schools. Who does he appoint? Charter schools operators on the commission to investigate themselves. So I go to this school board meeting to raise the issue of the corruption and I find one of the things that's happening there is testing. It's another scam. Pearson is one of the biggest testing companies in the world. They make money by doing tests. Every test you do in school, more money. So they said to the teachers, you're not going to do tests for your students anymore. We're going to have a private company do it. So they take out of the control of the teachers the testing of the students who know best what's going on. So what happens is, one of the school board members who's a teacher says at this board meeting, she's complaining because she spends all her time doing tests as a teacher. This is a teacher complaining who's on the state school board. I'm doing too much testing. You're doing too much testing. Then the head of the school board at that time from Stanford, who was a charter school operator, says, well, it's okay because we've got Pearson inside the school board, the state school board, to make sure that the tests are done properly. So they've actually brought in Pearson, a private company, to basically organize the testing of students in California. So what is Pearson doing? They're making money, and they want more testing of teachers and students to increase their profit. It has nothing to do about education. It's about increasing the profit of these companies who've taken over public education. They run it. Pearson company.
It's a textbook company. It was for forever. It's one of the biggest textbook companies international, and then they moved into ed tech stuff, education technology stuff. I have an interesting story about Pearson. That's actually how I got to part of how I started writing this book. I used to tutor for Pearson. A company that they had was an online subsidiary. It was called Smart Thinking. It was one of those cute ones. Somebody talked about a company where they smashed two of the letters together and crumbled it all into one word. It was Smart Thinking with one T. And I was on this non-compete clause. They paid me $11 an hour with a master's degree. Now, to be fair, if I would have went and did 5 more years of school and got a PhD, they'd pay me a whole $12 an hour. So, but there was this non-compete clause because one day I inferred that this is why. Because one day I realized they sent us an email. They say IBM's Watson is going to co-pilot with you. So IBM's Watson was like premier AI stuff before all the generative AI, ChatGPT and Claude and all this. Interesting little fact since you're mentioning white nationalism. It's named after Thomas Watson. Does anybody know the history of Thomas J. Watson? He was the head of IBM when they were doing business with Hitler to process the punch card data with the eugenics experiments that they did in the concentration camps. They named the AI after that guy, okay? But on the board during lockdowns, so they say it's going to co-pilot with you, and then I realized why they had this really rigid format for how you tutored, right? It was called PEEP, P-E-E-E-P, and I don't remember what the letters stand for, and I guess I'm not supposed to say that because it's proprietary. The company folded, it shouldn't matter, but it was these 6 steps, and I was like, oh, that's why they want you to do it like that, because if everybody has their own style and everybody has their own way of tutoring, it's going to be a lot more difficult for the AI to pull out the patterns, right? But if everybody has it in that order, it's going to be able to see, right, what are the most effective moves that you could make in that sort of that algorithm. And so when they did the lockdowns and they put everybody online, there's regulations 85 FR 18638, and they basically in there said, because prior to that, you had to have a certain amount of contact between a human student and a human teacher for courses, credits to transfer and such. What they did was, because they knew everybody was going to be online for distance learning, they changed that and they said that adaptive learning and AI, et cetera, can be substantively substituted for human interaction. And IBM was on the oversight board for those federal regulations. I wanted to add one more thing to the gentleman that mentioned the vouchers in Texas. So yes, a lot of them, especially like the ones that have the scholarship granting organizations, it's usually they're going to give you monies that you can use for tuition at a private school, or it could be, theoretically another public school or a public-private charter school. But you can also use them in certain states for various online ed tech applications, right? So, some of them are just online schools, in particular K-12 Inc. and OutSchool, right? OutSchool is funded by Sam Altman, okay, OpenAI man, another World Economic Forum guy. Another one you can get is called Nearpod. It's a little adaptive learning app that will personalize your learning, right? It's data mining, how quickly and how effectively you answer the module questions, and then it's going to personalize your stuff based on it. And that's funded by Mark Benioff, another Salesforce. He's the heart of Salesforce. So I wanted to throw out there that the vouchers are not just funding the private schools. They're funding the private ed tech companies that also pull more of that data to feed into the social credit profile. And with the vouchers, like the thing that's being promoted is that, why should you be stuck in your particular public school if you don't like it? Well, here's the thing. If you give somebody voucher money, and let's say they're in an area where the school's not that great, probably, right? That's probably an economically depressed area, so you're probably going to have a hard time with transportation as well. So the odds that the monies they give you, you're going to drive where to go to another school? How far are you going to go to get to that other school? You're going to go to the other. Most of that money, therefore, is going to go into the homeschooling, and it's not going to go into paper and pencil homeschooling. It's going to go into all these apps and wearables and things that's going to turn your house into a surveillance capital. Yeah. And my thing with, if it's supposed to help, they're trying to pitch some of this AI stuff that is like, all right, as a language guy, I can speak, right, to language arts. If there's anything that makes you a good writer, right? It's metacognition, right? It's thinking about thinking. It's making sure that the ideas in your head, right, when you put them on the paper, that, right, they map onto reality. The categories of the mind map to categories of reality, and it's a recursive process, right? There's the idea generation phase, sort of put your data in there, you know, it kind of got a very rough outline, and then from there you sort of, right, fill in the logic, and then eventually when you have your paragraphs, now you need to sort of go over it again. Does my thesis connect to my topic sentence? Does my topic sentence connect to my supporting details? Does my warrant connect to my supporting, and right, and then you go to the sentence level, right? Do I have unnecessary words here, right? Then you check your data. Do I have citations and right? All of that. If there's anything that the AI is doing, it's doing that metacognition for you, right? It's trying to expedite, even if it's something simple like Grammarly, right? And just like making your use of sentence structure more efficient, right? It's necessarily going to atrophy the brain. And there's a book that Google, the head of Google, what's his name, or used to be, the alphabet guy, Eric Schmidt and Kissinger wrote a book on AI probably a couple years ago now, and they talked about something like, I forget the phrase, it's something like cognitive atrophy or cognitive fatigue from AI because you're outsourcing much of the metacognition to this thing. And so, like, to your point, you can scale it, things come out faster, but like, to build on this example, like the reason why I'm able to explicate much of this data, you know, relatively articulately and quickly is because I've written about it. Because I've written about it, and that means I read what I wrote over and over again, and I asked questions, and so now, it's not just that I've gone over the map of the territory in my head, but I'm confident in it because I checked everything, and so now I can, but if I don't do that, I might have a nice textual product that I can get out really fast, but I don't really know it like I do if I go through that, you know, and so, yeah, I don't, personally, I don't think that AI can help with cognition or learning. I think it only impedes it.
The union leadership are actually partnering with these companies to bring in AI. We just heard earlier that they have a partnership with Anthropic to teach that in the schools. In San Francisco Unified School District, secret deals with OpenAI chat. I mean, they are actually introducing this technology, AI, which is destroying the public education system, the minds of kids. Google programs. You know, teachers now don't do lessons themselves. They put it on the Google sheet. All this information of young people, of students, is going into Google. All the lessons plans are in Google. Google has control of the information, all the information of public education in the United States. For what purpose? It's to get rid of teachers. It's to set up robots. They want to get rid of public education as we know it and make it commodified so they make profit off of public education. That's the whole purpose of charter schools, to privatize education. Now, this is an ideological, not just a factual information question, it's an ideological question, because the fact that the unions in California and nationally have taken money from these companies. They took money from Microsoft. They took money on testing, how best to test students. I mean, they took millions of dollars from these companies who are actually making money from testing to introduce it in the schools. They told the teachers, you have to do this. Like, why? Why in Sweden and in Finland, the teachers do their own tests for their students? Do you think that American teachers can't do their own tests for the kids that they're teaching? The nature of the system of capitalism is to commodify everything to make a profit out of it. That's really what we're talking about. It's commodify everything to make a profit. But the end result is the destruction of the working class and destruction of labor. And that's why we need a labor party. We need a political party that's going to challenge the Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats, remember Arnie Duncan? What happened when there was in New Orleans, the hurricane? And Arnie Duncan said, oh, this is a great opportunity to remake the schools of New Orleans. What they did in New Orleans is they destroyed all the public schools, mostly black teachers. Fired all the school teachers and put in charter schools in New Orleans. He saw that as an investment opportunity. He saw that hurricane as an investment opportunity to close the public schools and open charters to destroy the unions. And what the hell did the unions do? Where was Randy Weingarten?
You know, the
You know, the,
CIO was in there trying to save the teachers.
well, I mean, they don't, in California, there's no education. As we heard today, the CSU is organizing with the California Faculty Association around AI. Are they making a political campaign? Are they educating at CSU and UC what this means to the working class, to young people, to the faculty, the students? You know, she just quit the Democratic Party Executive Committee, but she also voted against single payer.
Yes.
California, the teachers in California are now striking for their health care. San Francisco, the teachers are saying, we want full health care. But they don't raise the issue of, get these insurance companies out of the healthcare business. Let's have single payer.
Because the Democrats don't.
Because the Democratic Party, they're in the Democratic Party. Randy Weingarten was the leader, and she voted when they had a national committee meeting about the program of the Democratic Party. There was a motion for single payer. She voted against it. And she's head of the American Federation of Teachers. So this problem, this contradiction that we're in, is that the union bureaucracy is not representing workers. They're representing these corporations. How else would you invite Anthropic and these AI companies to help us train for AI, how to use AI? You've got to be insane. It is insanity.
There's a lot of overlap, right? Like for us at UPS, as UPS drivers, they have AI and they use Microsoft. They use Google Maps. And now the route delivery order for us, it's AI. AI tells us where to go now. Like, and how did they do that? They learned off of the veteran drivers how to run the route, and they took that they took those models and they made it more efficient for us to cut our hours and cut routes. So there's a lot of overlap between our industries, and we need to get together and we need to talk about these problems, or else we're all going to go down
okay,
together.
look, this conference, this meeting we're having today, is the first meeting that I know about in the United States. Well, we had a smaller meeting in San Francisco where workers from all different industries can come together and start comparing notes, can discuss and learn about what's happening. This is the only way we can confront a systemic problem, not union by union, but separately. We have to come together and educate ourselves, learn from each other what is going on, how it's affecting us, how they're using it, what's their ideology behind it. If we can do that, the movement we can build can be very powerful. We can challenge them. But you have to know what you're challenging. And the way that this is being introduced, people don't have any idea of what's happening to them.